The sun was setting over Seattle, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Inside a quiet home, Emily sat on the couch, her eyes fixed on the TV, though her mind was far away. The movie playing was an old favorite, one she used to watch with her husband. Mark. The familiar music and dialogue made her heart ache. Her 8-year-old son, Noah, sat beside her, half asleep and holding his blanket. He looked at her with sleepy eyes and asked, "Mom, why are we watching this? Dad will be back soon." His voice was so innocent, so sure, it almost broke her. Emily smiled gently, though her heart felt heavy. "Yeah, sweetheart," she whispered. "Dad will be back soon." Shh. She reached over, brushed a curl from his forehead, and kissed him softly. He smiled, satisfied with her answer, and turned back to the screen. But Emily couldn't stop the thought that echoed in her mind. Will he really? Mark had been gone for 3 months. He said it was a work trip, just 2 weeks in Portland. At first, everything felt normal. They talked every night, shared stories, laughed over the phone. But after a while, the calls became shorter. Then they stopped. His texts came less often, filled with excuses, busy day, late meeting, talk soon. And now, nothing. No calls. No messages. Just silence. Emily told herself not to worry. She reminded herself that Mark had always been hardworking. He loved his job and loved his family. She told her heart to be patient. But when she looked at the clock every night and saw the empty side of the bed, she felt something deep inside her changing. Doubt, small at first, began to grow. When Noah finally fell asleep that night, Emily turned off the TV and sat in silence. The sound of the refrigerator humming was the only thing in the room. She looked at her phone again. No new notifications. Her heart sank. She wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to ask why he hadn't called. But she was afraid. What if he didn't answer? What if something was wrong? Or worse, what if he simply didn't want to talk to her anymore? The memories came flooding back. Their first date at the old coffee shop downtown, their wedding day under a soft drizzle of rain. The night Noah was born, and Mark cried, holding him for the first time. Those memories used to comfort her. Now they only reminded her of how distant things had become. She sighed and whispered to herself, "Where are you, Mark?" Her voice trembled as she said it. The question hung in the air with no answer. Then, suddenly, her phone lit up. A new message appeared. Her heart jumped. Maybe it was him. But when she opened it, the number was unknown. The message was short, almost haunting. "You deserve to know the truth." Emily froze. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the words. Her first thought was that it must be a mistake. Maybe it was spam? But the timing, it felt too strange, too direct. She reread it several times. Her stomach twisted with unease. What truth? About what? About who? She tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. She just sat there, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She checked the message again, as if maybe the meaning would change. But it didn't. It was still just those 6 words. Emily stood up and walked to the window. The city lights shimmered outside. Cars moved along the streets. People were out there living their lives. And she was standing in her own house, wondering if her marriage was quietly falling apart. She tried to sleep that night but couldn't. Every sound made. Her heart jumped, the creak of the floor, the hum of the heater, the buzz of her phone. She checked it again and again, hoping for another message from Mark, but there was nothing. Only that one strange text that refused to leave her mind. When morning came, she put on a brave face for Noah. She made him pancakes, packed a school lunch, and smiled like everything was normal. Noah talked excitedly about his school trip next week, about how he wanted to tell his dad all about it when he came home. Emily nodded, pretending she believed that would happen. After dropping him off at school, she sat in her car for a long time. She thought about calling Mark again. She even typed a message, "Are you okay? Please call me." But then she deleted it. She didn't want to sound desperate. She wanted to believe he still cared, that he hadn't simply chosen to forget them. On her way home, she stopped at the coffee shop where they used to meet on weekends. The smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air, and for a moment, she almost smiled. She sat at their favorite corner table, the one near the window. It was empty, but she could almost see them there laughing, teasing each other, sharing quiet looks that spoke of love. But that was then. Now there was just her, a half-empty cup, and 1,000 questions. Later that day, Emily went through old photos on her phone, their last family vacation. Noah's birthday, Mark's smile that always reached his eyes. She wanted to believe that smile was still real. She wanted to believe that wherever he was thinking about them too. That evening, she picked Noah up from school. He was cheerful as always, talking nonstop about his day. When they reached home, she helped him with homework, made dinner, and tried to laugh with him. But when he asked, "Mom, can we call Dad tonight?" she felt her chest tighten. She hesitated, then said softly, "Dad might be busy, sweetheart. Maybe tomorrow." Noah nodded, trusting her words, then went back to drawing. His innocence both comforted and hurt her. He believed everything she said. He still believed in his dad. When night came again, the loneliness returned like a wave. Emily sat by the window, staring out into the dark. She checked her phone once more. No new messages. She sighed and whispered, "Please, Mark, just call me." As if on cue, her phone buzzed. Her heart leaped, but it wasn't him. It was the same unknown number again. This time, there was an image attached. Her hands shook as she opened it. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, until it appeared clearly on the screen. It was Mark, sitting at a cafe smiling, but he wasn't alone. Across from him was a woman, younger, laughing, her hand resting on his. They looked comfortable, familiar. Like two people who shared something more than just coffee, Emily's world went still. The room felt colder. Her hand trembled as she lowered the phone. She stared at the photo, trying to make sense of it, trying to believe it wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, she knew. Something inside her broke quietly, without sound, like glass cracking under pressure. She looked at the TV still playing in the background. The same movie she'd watched with him so many times before. It was a love story about two people who promised to never lie to each other. The irony made her laugh. But the sound came out as a sob. She wiped her tears quickly as Noah's voice called from the hallway. "Mom, can you tuck me in?" She swallowed the pain, turned off the TV, and went to him. "Of course, sweetheart," she said softly, forcing a smile, but as she tucked him in and watched him close his eyes. One thought wouldn't leave her mind: you deserve to know the truth. And now? She did that the next morning. Emily woke up early. The sky outside was gray and heavy with clouds. She made breakfast for Noah, packed his school bag, and kept her voice steady even though her mind was spinning. The photo from last night was all she could think about. It was still on her phone, Mark, sitting at a cafe, laughing with another woman. Every time she saw it, her chest tightened. She wanted to delete it, but couldn't. It felt like proof that her instincts had been right all along. After dropping Noah at school, she sat in her car for a long time. The world outside moved normally, people going to work, kids running cars, passing, but Emily felt frozen. How could everything look so normal when her world had changed overnight? She thought about calling Mark, but her hands wouldn't move. What would she even say? Who is she? Why are you with her? She had no proof except one photo, one moment frozen in time. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was just having coffee with a friend. But deep down, she knew. There was something different in his smile, the same smile he used to give her. When she got home, the house felt too quiet. She made herself a cup of coffee, but barely touched it. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge seemed louder than usual. Her phone buzzed again, making her jump. Another message from the same unknown number. This time it said, "He's not who you think he is." Emily's breath caught. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Her first thought was anger. Who was this person? Why were they sending her this? Were they trying to hurt her or help her? She typed a reply, "Who are you? Why are you sending me this?" and hit send. No response. She tried calling the number again. Straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. Instead, she sat on the couch and stared at the wall, feeling small and powerless. At noon, her sister Claire called to check in. "Hey, Em, you sound tired. Everything okay?" Emily wanted to tell her everything, but the words caught in her throat. She forced a light tone. "I'm fine, just didn't sleep much." Claire didn't sound convinced. "Still no word from Mark?" "Not yet. He's busy," Emily said, her voice breaking slightly. Claire sighed. Maybe it's time you stop giving him excuses." That sentence hit hard. Emily ended the call quickly, saying she had to pick up Noah soon. But Claire's words stayed in her head. Stop giving him excuses. That evening, when Noah came home, his smile brought her a small comfort. He talked about school, about how he made a new friend, about how he couldn't wait for his birthday next week. "Dad promised he'd be home for it," Noah said excitedly. Emily's heart squeezed. "Yes, he did," she replied softly. After Noah went to bed, Emily sat alone in the dim light of the living room. She opened the photo again and zoomed in. The woman with Mark looked familiar, but Emily couldn't place her. Maybe she'd seen her before at one of his work events, or maybe online. The woman looked younger, her hair perfectly styled, her smile bright. They looked comfortable together, like two people who didn't have to hide anything. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This time, no words, just another photo. Mark and the same woman, walking hand in hand down a street. He was carrying coffee cups, laughing at something she said. Emily stared at the image, her heart sinking deeper with each passing second. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't innocent. It was real. Her first reaction was disbelief. Then anger. Then sadness. She set her phone down and pressed her hands to her face. The tears came silently, the kind that hurt more because you tried to hold them back. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just sat there, feeling like the air had been knocked out of her chest. She thought about all the nights she had waited for him to call, the messages she had written and deleted, the lies she told herself to stay calm. And now one picture had shattered everything. But even in that pain, she thought of Noah, her son, who believed his father was a hero. How would she tell him? Should she even tell him? He was too young to understand betrayal, too innocent to know what heartbreak looked like. The days that followed were heavy. Emily tried to act normal, keeping her routine the same. She took Noah to school, cooked dinner, smiled when she had to. But at night, when the house went quiet, she stared at her phone, waiting for Mark to call to explain, to deny anything. But he didn't single quotes one evening, as she was folding laundry. Her phone finally rang. It was Mark. Her heart raced. She took a deep breath and answered, trying to sound calm. Hey. His voice came through, casual, almost distant. "Sorry, been crazy busy here." "How are you and Noah?" Emily paused. "We're okay. When are you coming home?" There was a long silence. Then he said, "Soon. Just need to wrap a few things up." She wanted to scream, to confront him about the photos, but something inside her stopped her. She needed to be sure before she said anything. So instead, she said quietly, "Noah misses you." "I miss him too," Mark replied, his voice softening. "Tell him I'll call him tomorrow, okay?" And then he hung up. Just like that, Emily stared at her phone for a long time. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. No warmth, no love, just words that felt practiced. Later that night, when Noah asked if Dad would be home soon, Emily smiled weakly. "Yes, baby," he said he will. But as she watched Noah drift to sleep, she knew deep down that their lives were already changing. The next morning, Emily decided to find out the truth herself. She opened her laptop and started searching through social media. She typed the name of the company Mark worked for, scrolled through posts, events, and photos. And then she saw at a company dinner from last month. There was Mark, standing beside the same woman. Their hands weren't touching, but their eyes were. The caption read, "Great evening with the best team." Emily closed the laptop. The proof was there. She didn't need more. That night, she sat on the porch, watching the rain fall. The city lights blurred through her tears. She remembered the first time Mark told her he loved her, the way he looked at her on their wedding day, the promises they made. She wondered when he stopped meaning them. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message. You can pretend you don't see it, but he's already gone. Emily didn't reply. She didn't cry this time either. She just stared at the rain and whispered, "Then I guess it's time to stop waiting." Inside, Noah slept peacefully, dreaming of a world where families never break apart. Emily wished she could live in that world too. But now, she knew pretending wouldn't fix what was already broken. The woman in the photos had taken what Emily once believed would last forever. And yet, somewhere deep inside, Emily felt something new beginning. Not hope for Mark, but for herself. The truth hurt, but it also set her free. The morning air was cold when Emily woke up. She hadn't slept much. For days, she'd lived with a storm of questions. But now she had made a choice. She would find Mark and see the truth with her own eyes. She couldn't keep living between doubt and pain. It was time to face reality, no matter how much it hurt. After dropping Noah off at her sister Claire's house, she packed a small bag, booked a bus ticket to Portland, and told Claire she was visiting a friend. Claire looked worried but didn't ask. Maybe she already knew. Emily didn't want to say the words out loud, not yet. As the bus rolled down the highway, Emily stared out the window. The rain streaked down the glass, blurring the world outside. Her hands gripped her phone tightly. Every few minutes, she checked it. No messages from Mark. She didn't expect any now. He had built a wall of silence between them. Still, part of her heart hoped she was wrong, that maybe there was an explanation, something that would make all the pain disappear. When she arrived in Portland, the air smelled of wet pavement and coffee. She walked straight to the hotel where Mark had told her he was staying. The lobby was quiet, decorated with polished floors and fake plants. The woman at the front desk smiled politely. "Hi," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm looking for my husband, Mark Reynolds. He's been staying here for work." The receptionist typed something into her computer, then looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have anyone by that name." Emily's heart dropped. "Are you sure? Maybe under his company's name." The woman shook her head. "No, I checked both. Sorry." Emily stepped back, feeling the floor tilt beneath her. She thanked the woman and walked outside. The wind hit her face hard. Her mind was spinning. If he wasn't staying there, where was he? She started walking aimlessly down the street, holding her phone like it might give her answers. She wanted to call him, to shout, to demand the truth, but then she stopped. Across the street, something caught her eye. A familiar figure. A familiar laugh. Her heart froze. Mark. He was standing outside a cafe holding a paper cup. And beside him was the same woman from the photos. They were close, too close. She touched his arm as she laughed. And he looked at her the way he used to look at Emily. For a few seconds, Emily couldn't move. It felt like the world had gone quiet, every sound fading except her heartbeat. Her fingers went numb. She wanted to run, to hide, but her legs carried her forward. Slowly, carefully, she crossed the street. Mark turned, and when his eyes met hers, all color drained from his face. He froze, the smile vanishing instantly. The woman beside him frowned in confusion, glancing between them. "Emily," he said, his voice weak. What are you doing here?" She stopped a few steps away. Her throat felt tight, her chest burning. "I could ask you the same thing," she said quietly. The woman stepped back slightly, realizing what was happening. She mumbled something and hurried away, leaving them standing there in the drizzle. Mark opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I called the hotel," Emily continued, her voice shaking. "You weren't there. You said you were working, Mark. You said you'd be home soon. But this is what you were doing." Mark rubbed his face, avoiding her eyes. "Emily, it's not what it looks like." She gave a bitter laugh. "It's exactly what it looks like." He looked up then, guilt written all over his face. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said softly. It got complicated." "Complicated," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You have a family, Mark. You have a son who waits every night for your call. He made you a birthday card last week and said he couldn't wait to show you. But you were too busy being complicated. Mark flinched. His voice was low, almost a whisper. I'm sorry, Emily. I messed up. I didn't know how to tell you. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. You didn't have to tell me, she said. You just had to not do it. He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. The distance between them felt wider than ever. For years, she had loved this man, trusted him, believed in him, and now she didn't even recognize the person standing in front of her. I never wanted to hurt you, said, his voice trembling. But you did, she replied. And the worst part is, you didn't even stop yourself. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain fell softly, soaking the pavement. People passed by, unaware of the heartbreak happening just a few feet away. Finally, Mark whispered, Please, Emily, let me explain. She shook her head. There's nothing left to explain. You made your choice. He looked desperate. It was a mistake. I don't love her. Things between us were different. You were distant, I was lonely. She cut him off sharply. Don't you dare blame me for your lies. You walked away, Mark, not me. The words came out stronger than she expected. It was as if, in that moment, something inside her broke free. The fear, the confusion, the pain. She felt it all fall away, leaving only clarity. Mark stood there, silent. Ashamed after what felt like an eternity, Emily turned to leave. I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for, she said softly, because it wasn't me. She walked away, her heart aching but steady. Mark called her name once, but she didn't turn around. The rain kept falling, washing away the tears that finally began to slip down her cheeks down by the time she reached the bus station. Her hands were shaking. She sat on a bench, staring at nothing. For years, she had built her life around a love that she thought was unbreakable. Now, she was realizing that even the strongest bonds could crumble. When honesty was lost, when she got back to Seattle that night, Claire met her at the door. One look at Emily's face, and she knew. You saw him, Claire said quietly. Emily nodded. I saw everything I needed to. Claire hugged her tightly. You don't deserve this. I know, Emily whispered, her voice calm but tired. But maybe it's time to stop pretending everything's fine. Later, after a long shower, Emily stood by Noah's bed. He was sleeping peacefully, his small hands tucked under his pillow. She brushed his hair and whispered, I'm sorry, sweetheart. But everything's going to be okay. She didn't know how yet. But she knew she couldn't keep living in pain. That night, for the first time in months, Emily didn't wait for Mark's call. She turned off her phone, climbed into bed beside her son, and held him close. The storm outside raged, but inside she felt a strange kind of peace, the quiet strength that comes after heartbreak. The moment you realize you've survived the worst of it, and though she didn't know what the future held. One thing was clear, she would never let anyone make her feel small again. Tomorrow, she would start over. Without lies. Without waiting. Without him. 2 months passed since that day in Portland. The memories still hurt, but they no longer controlled Emily's life. She and Noah had moved into a smaller house near her sister's neighborhood, a cozy place with a little garden. White curtains and the sound of birds every morning. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful, and peace was what she needed most. Every corner of the old house had reminded her of Mark, his shoes by the door, his coffee mug in the kitchen, his laugh echoing in the hallway. This new house was different. It was quiet, simple, and honest. It belonged to her and Noah alone. Emily spent her days working from home, writing for a small local magazine. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped her rebuild her independence. Each morning, she'd walk Noah to school, holding his little hand as they crossed the street. His laughter had become her medicine. He didn't know everything that had happened, but children have a way of sensing when things change. Still, he never asked hard questions, just smiled, hugged her, and said, I love you, Mom. That was enough. One evening, Emily stood by the stove making dinner when Noah came running in, his school bag bouncing. Mom, look what I made, he said, holding up a paper drawing. It was a picture of their little house, the two of them standing outside, smiling under a big sun. Above it, in shaky handwriting, he had written, "Me and Mom team forever." Emily felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were warm, not painful. She knelt, hugged him tight, and whispered, "That's beautiful, sweetheart. You and me, always." After dinner, they watched a movie together, the same one she once watched with Mark. But this time, it didn't hurt as much. It was just a story on a screen. Life had moved on, and so had she. As Noah laughed at the funny parts, he suddenly turned to her and asked softly, "Mom, are you sad?" Emily smiled gently, brushing his hair back. "Not anymore, baby. Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they go away. But that doesn't mean we stop living. We just find new things to be happy about." He nodded, not fully understanding, but comforted by her calm tone. "Do you think Dad will come back someday?" he asked. She paused, then said carefully, "Maybe one day he'll visit. But even if he doesn't, we'll be okay. We have each other, right?" Noah smiled. "Right?" That night, after tucking him into bed, Emily sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was clear, the stars scattered above her like tiny lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt light, not because everything was perfect, but because she had accepted that it didn't have to be. She thought about the last conversation she'd had with Mark. He had called 2 weeks after she left him. His voice had been quiet, almost broken. He said he was sorry that he'd ended things with the other woman, that he wanted to fix what he'd ruined. Emily had listened, but her heart was calm. "Mark," she'd said gently, "for years I waited for you to come home. But the man who left isn't the man I loved anymore. I forgive you, but I can't go back." He didn't argue. He only said, "I understand," and hung up. She cried afterward, not out of regret, but because it was the final goodbye, the end of the chapter she'd been afraid to close. Now, sitting under the quiet night sky, she realized how far she'd come. The pain that once crushed her had turned into strength. She could breathe again. She could laugh again. And most importantly, she could look at her reflection without feeling like a stranger. A week later, she got a message on social media from Daniel, an old college friend she hadn't spoken to in years. He wrote, "Hey, I heard you moved back to Seattle. I'm in town for a few weeks. Would you like to catch up sometime?" Emily read the message twice. Her first instinct was to say no. She wasn't ready for anything new. But then she smiled. This wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about opening a new door. So she replied simply, "That sounds nice. Let's meet for coffee." On the day they met, she felt nervous. She wore a simple white blouse and light jeans, nothing fancy, just her true self. When she walked into the cafe, Daniel was already there, waiting with 2 cups of coffee. He looked surprised, but happy to see her. "Emily," he said warmly, "it's been forever." "It really has," she said, smiling for real this time. They talked for hours about work, life, memories from college. He didn't ask about Mark, and she didn't bring it up. It felt refreshing to have a conversation that wasn't about the past, just the present moment. When she got home that evening, Noah ran to her, asking, "Mom, did you have fun?" She laughed softly. "I did, sweetheart." It was nice to talk to an old friend. "Will you see him again?" he asked with a curious grin. "Maybe," she said, smiling. "We'll see." Over the next few weeks, Emily started to feel alive again. She spent time with friends, took Noah to the park, and even started painting something she hadn't done in years. The more she filled her days with love and purpose, the smaller the shadow of the past became. Sometimes when she tucked Noah in at night, he still whispered, "Dad will be back soon, right?" Emily would stroke his hair gently and whisper, "That's okay, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine." And she meant it. One evening, as she cleaned up after dinner, she found one of Mark's old letters in a box she hadn't unpacked yet. It was from years ago, back when they were young and full of dreams. She read it slowly, smiling sadly at his old handwriting, the promises, the love that once felt unshakable. When she finished, she folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just part of her story, a chapter she had lived, learned from, and outgrown. Spring arrived soon after. The garden outside her window bloomed with color, bright tulips and daisies, full of life. Emily stood there one morning watching Noah chase butterflies, his laughter echoing through the yard. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel again. "Coffee later?" he wrote. She smiled and typed back, "I'd like that." For the first time in years, Emily wasn't waiting for someone to come back. She wasn't searching for answers. She was simply living one day at a time, one smile at a time. The pain had taught her something valuable. Sometimes losing someone doesn't mean the end of your story. It just means you're ready to begin a new one. As the sun set that evening, Emily sat with Noah on the porch, watching the sky turn golden. He leaned against her shoulder and said softly, "Mom, I love our new home." She wrapped her arm around him and smiled. "Me too, baby. Me too." And for the first time, she truly meant it. The chapter of heartbreak was over and the story of healing had just begun. The house always felt colder at night. It wasn't the weather, it was the silence that followed Eleanor wherever she went. The sound of rain against the windows didn't comfort her anymore. It reminded her of the nights when her husband used to sit beside her, reading quietly while she sipped tea. Those moments were gone now, faded into memories that hurt to remember. 2 years had passed since he died, but the ache stayed quiet and heavy. It's like a forgotten song still playing somewhere in the house. Her son Michael had moved back home after college, promising to help her out for a while. At first, Eleanor had been grateful. She thought his presence would fill the house again with life. But instead, something invisible had grown between them, a distance she couldn't explain. They shared the same kitchen, the same living room, even the same silence, but not the same warmth. Michael loved his mother deeply, but since his father's death, he had seen her differently. She had aged beautifully, with soft lines around her eyes and a calm strength that made her seem untouchable. He respected her, but sometimes he caught himself watching her too long. It wasn't romantic, at least that's what he told himself. It was something more complicated, something he couldn't name. Maybe it was admiration, or maybe it was the loneliness that both of them carried without saying a word. One late evening, thunder rolled softly across the sky. The lights flickered, and Eleanor stood near the window, watching the rain fall like sheets of glass. She wore a long, pale sweater, her hair loose and silver in the dim light. There was something peaceful about her stillness, even in sorrow. Michael walked into the room holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. He hesitated before speaking. "You shouldn't stand so close to the cold window, Mom. You'll catch a chill." She turned slightly, smiling in that gentle way she always did when he worried too much. "I'm fine, Michael. I was just thinking." He handed her a cup. "About Dad." Her smile faded just a little. "Always about him. You don't stop missing someone. You just learn to carry the space they left behind." Michael looked down. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but words felt useless. So he just nodded, watching the rain slide down the glass. "I wish I'd talked to him more," he said quietly. "He used to tell me things I didn't understand. Now I wish I had listened better." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes soft but tired. "You were young, sweetheart. You listened in your own way." For a moment, they both stood there in silence. The storm outside seemed to echo the emotions swirling between them in spoken, heavy, real. Then Eleanor sighed and walked to the couch. "Come sit," she said, patting the space beside her. Michael joined her. They sat close, but not touching. The room smelled faintly of rain and tea leaves. On the table lay an old photo frame, a picture of Eleanor, her late husband, and a young Michael grinning in front of a Christmas tree. She picked it up and brushed her thumb over the glass. "We had such good days," she whispered. Michael watched her face, memorizing the way her eyes softened with memory. "You still have good days ahead," he said. She smiled faintly, though her voice trembled. "Do I?" He wanted to tell her yes. He wanted to promise her she'd be happy again, that she wouldn't have to wake up alone. But the truth was, he didn't know. The only thing he knew was that he couldn't stand seeing her this sad anymore. Something deep inside him wanted to protect her, to make her smile again, even if it meant giving more of himself than he should. That night, after she went to bed, Michael stayed awake on the couch. He stared at the empty teacups, the soft glow of the lamp, and the framed photograph on the table. The more he thought about her, the more his chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't understand. It wasn't love in the way people spoke of it. It was something else. A deep, aching tenderness that came from watching someone fade quietly while pretending to be strong. Upstairs, Eleanor couldn't sleep either. She lay under her blanket, listening to the faint hum of the storm. She thought of Michael, how kind he had been lately, how he took care of things without being asked. She was proud of him, but she also felt something unsettling. The way he looked at her sometimes, as if she was fragile, made her heart beat differently. Maybe it was just loneliness, hers and his, mixing together in the quiet. When she came down early the next morning, she found him asleep on the couch. The blanket had slipped off and the rain had stopped, leaving a thin silver light across the floor. She stood there for a moment, watching him. His hair was messy, his face calm in sleep, and for a fleeting second, she saw not her son, but the man he had become, strong, caring, still searching for something he hadn't found yet. She bent down quietly and placed the blanket back over him. "You remind me so much of him," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. Michael stirred slightly, but didn't wake. She walked to the kitchen, her heart strangely full and heavy at the same time. Later that day, when he awoke, she was already making breakfast. "You fell asleep down here," she said, without looking at him. "Yeah," he replied, rubbing his eyes. "Guess I couldn't stop thinking." "About what?" He hesitated. "About us. About Dad. About how fast everything changes." She nodded slowly. "It does, but some things stay. The love we had never really leaves." Michael looked at her. The morning light through the window caught her face in a way that made her look almost younger. "I'm glad I'm here," he said quietly, "even if it's just for a while." She gave him a small smile. "Me too, Michael." For the rest of the day, they moved around each other carefully, like two people learning how to speak again after years of silence. Small gestures, a shared meal, a short laugh, a simple glance began to rebuild the bond they thought they had lost. Yet, under that growing warmth, both of them felt something they couldn't name. That night, as Eleanor read a book by the fire, Michael sat across from her, pretending to scroll through his phone. But really, he was just watching her, studying every detail. The way the firelight softened her features, the way she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He didn't mean to feel what he felt. It wasn't wrong, but it was dangerous in a quiet, emotional way. It was a longing not for romance, but for connection, for the warmth they had both lost. And when he finally went to bed, he couldn't shake the thought that something had changed forever. The line between comfort and closeness had begun to blur, even if neither of them dared to admit it. In the silence of that night, with only the soft sound of the wind outside, both Eleanor and Michael lay awake, feeling the same unspoken ache, the same longing for something they couldn't define. And though nothing had been said, both of them knew deep down their story had just begun. The weeks after that quiet night were strangely gentle. The rain had passed, but something new hung in the air between Eleanor and Michaela, closeness neither of them could explain. It wasn't love in the way stories describe it, but a deep, quiet need to feel understood. They started spending more time together, not because they planned to, but because it felt easier than being alone. Eleanor began painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Her husband used to say her art could bring warmth to any room. One afternoon, sunlight spilled across the living room floor while she painted a field of wildflowers. Her movements were calm, her face peaceful. Michael walked in from work, stopped at the doorway, and just watched her. He didn't mean to stare, but something about seeing her lost in color made him forget to speak. The smell of paint, the soft sound of her brush, and the stillness of the house felt like a scene from another life. He finally said quietly, "You're really good at that." She looked up, surprised. "Oh, it's nothing serious. It just keeps my mind busy." He smiled, taking a few steps closer. "No, really. It's beautiful. He caught himself, pausing before finishing. "You're very talented." Eleanor noticed the way he hesitated, the way his voice softened before he corrected himself. A part of her wanted to ignore it, pretend it was just kindness. But deep down, she felt the shift. For a few seconds, the air seemed heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. She smiled politely. "Thank you, Michael. It means a lot." Then she returned to her painting, hoping the moment would fade. But it didn't. That small exchange left a trace of warmth and unease in both their hearts. Michael didn't understand it fully. He just felt drawn to her presence. After losing his father, he had grown used to seeing Eleanor as strong and untouchable. But lately she seemed human again, soft, vulnerable, quietly beautiful. It confused him. It scared him. That evening, they cooked dinner together. Eleanor chopped vegetables while Michael set the table. The light flickered slightly from the old chandelier above, and the kitchen smelled of herbs and garlic. When she reached up to grab a bowl from the shelf, he instinctively moved behind her to help. Their shoulders brushed, just barely. But it sent an unexpected shiver through him. "Got it," he said quickly. Pulling the bowl down, she turned, smiling gently. "Thank you." He nodded, stepping back a little too fast. "Sure." They continued cooking, pretending nothing happened. Yet every small touch, every shared glance, carried a weight neither of them wanted to name. After dinner, they sat on the porch with cups of tea, listening to crickets. The world outside was calm, but inside both of them there was a storm they didn't talk about. His words were honest, too honest. For a second they both looked at each other, mother and son. Yet something deeper flickered beneath that surface. A longing not of romance, but of two lonely souls trying to find warmth in the same empty house. She stood up suddenly, setting her cup aside. "It's getting late. You should rest." He nodded, sensing her unease. "Good night, Mom." She paused at the door, her voice softer. "Good night, Michael." That night, neither of them slept well. Michael kept thinking about the way she looked under the porch light, the way her voice trembled when she spoke. He wasn't in love with her, he knew that, but something inside him ached to protect her, to take away the sadness that had lived in her eyes for so long. Eleanor, lying in her bed, stared at the ceiling. She wasn't angry or confused, just deeply emotional. She missed her husband, but she also missed being seen, being spoken to, like she mattered. And lately, Michael's kindness reminded her what it felt like to be noticed. The next morning, she avoided his eyes at breakfast. The air was calm but heavy, filled with thoughts left unsaid. Michael tried to talk about work, the weather, anything ordinary, but their smiles felt forced. Later that day, while she was watering the plants outside, Michael came to her with a small wooden box. "I fixed the old frame from your wedding photo," he said. It had cracked. She looked at it, touched. "You didn't have to do that." "Kai wanted to," he said quietly. She took the frame, her fingers brushing his for a moment. "Thank you, Michael." He looked at her, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. "You deserve to keep those memories safe." That single sentence made her heart ache. Not because of what he said, but because of how much care was in it. She smiled, forcing lightness into her tone. "You're too kind." That evening, as the sky turned golden, Eleanor painted again. This time, Michael sat on the couch, watching quietly, pretending to read but stealing glances when she wasn't looking. The brushstrokes, the smell of paint, the way her hair fell softly over her face, it all felt intimate in a quiet, innocent way. When she finally put the brush down, she turned toward him. "You've been quiet. Something on your mind?" He looked up, startled. "Just thinking about." He hesitated. About how strange life is. How close people can be and still feel 1,000 miles apart. Eleanor smiled sadly. "Yes, but sometimes distance protects us." Her words hung in the air like a quiet warning, though neither of them said more. She stood, stretching, and said softly, "I think I'll turn in early." Michael nodded. "Good night." When she left the room, he exhaled deeply, realizing how hard it had become to balance his emotions. He didn't want to hurt her or himself, but he couldn't ignore how deeply connected he felt. Upstairs, Eleanor sat at her dresser, staring at her reflection. She saw a woman who had survived loss, but didn't know how to move forward. She also saw something else, hope, flickering quietly, even if it frightened her. That night, she whispered to herself, "He's just being kind. Don't read into it." But the warmth in her chest told her that part of her already had. In the days that followed, they both acted normal. They laughed again, shared small jokes, cooked together, and filled the house with the sound of living. But under every laugh and every look there was something unspoken, a delicate thread neither dared to cut. And though nothing wrong had happened, both of them knew they were standing near a line, one drawn not by rules, but by emotion. That was the beginning of the blur, the quiet moment where affection and confusion began to mix. Neither Eleanor nor Michael meant for it to happen. It was just the natural pull of two hearts trying to heal from the same grief, finding warmth where life had grown cold. And while neither of them said it aloud, both knew that their story had just changed course quietly, invisibly. And without warning, the morning began like any other quiet sunlight slipping through the curtains, the soft hum of birds outside and the smell of coffee filling the house. Eleanor sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by old photo boxes. She hadn't meant to open them, but something about the calm morning made her want to remember. The pictures were faded, the corners worn, but the faces still smiled as if time hadn't moved. Michael came downstairs, his hair still messy from sleep. When he saw her sitting there, he paused. The way she looked peaceful, focused, a hint of sadness in her eyes made him forget to speak for a second. "Morning," he said finally. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning. I was just cleaning these old boxes. I didn't realize how many memories were hidden in here." He joined her on the floor, picking up one of the photographs. It was of him and his father by the lake, both laughing, wet from jumping and fully clothed. "He used to take me fishing," Michael said, his voice low. "I remember how you always packed those sandwiches he loved." Eleanor laughed softly. "He hated how much mayonnaise I used, but he never said a word." Their laughter faded into silence. She reached for another photo, her wedding day. The dress, the smile, the joy, all looked like it belonged to someone else now. "I was so young," she murmured. "I didn't know how fast everything would change." Michael placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were beautiful," he said quietly. She turned her head, their eyes meeting. There was no hesitation in his gaze, just sincerity and warmth. She felt her heart skip, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. It had been years since anyone had looked at her like that with such gentle admiration. Trying to hide her emotion, she said softly, "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not? It's true." The air around them thickened with unspoken tension. For a long moment, neither of them looked away. Then she cleared her throat, trying to break the moment. "Would you help me put these in order? Maybe we can make an album." He nodded quickly. Sure, they spent the next hour sorting photos, but both of them felt distracted. Every time their hands brushed while reaching for the same picture, Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. Michael felt it too, but didn't understand why. There was no wrong intention, yet there was a strange closeness and emotional gravity pulling them together at one point. She reached for a photo at the same time he did, and their fingers lingered. She tried to move her hand away, but he didn't let go right away. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like seeing you lonely, Mom. You deserve happiness." Eleanor froze. The tenderness in his words hit her heart like a wave. "Michael," she said quietly, "some things we can't fix. Some things we just have to accept." He shook his head. "You gave up too soon. You think because Dad's gone, your life ended too. But it didn't. You're still here. You still have so much love to give." She looked at him, her throat tight. "And who would I give it to?" Their eyes met again, and this time neither of them looked away. The silence between them was charged, fragile, but deep. Then, without thinking, Michael reached for her hand. It was a simple gesture meant to comfort her. But when his fingers wrapped around hers, something changed. She didn't pull back immediately. She felt the warmth of his hand, the sincerity behind it, and the confusion it stirred in her. For a few seconds, time felt suspended. No future. Just that quiet connection neither could name. Then reality struck. She withdrew her hand gently, standing up. "You shouldn't do that," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." He said quickly, guilt flashing across his face. I hate seeing you sad. I didn't mean anything wrong." Eleanor turned away, trying to steady her breath. I know you didn't." But she also knew something inside her had shifted. Not in a way she wanted, but in a way she couldn't ignore. The loneliness that had lived in her heart for years had finally been noticed, and that was dangerous. Michael stood, unsure of what to do. "Mom, please don't be upset." She faced him, her expression soft but serious. "I'm not upset. I'm just confused. We're both hurting. And sometimes when people hurt, they start looking for comfort in the wrong places." He nodded slowly, shame washing over him. "You're right." For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence. Eleanor gathered the photos into a pile, her hands trembling slightly. Michael wanted to help but didn't move. He felt something heavy pressing on his chest, a mix of guilt, affection, and sorrow. After a moment, Eleanor said quietly, "You should take a walk. Clear your head." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe I should." When he left, the door closed softly behind him. Eleanor sat down again, her eyes falling on the wedding picture lying on the floor. Her younger self smiled back at her, a girl full of hope, standing beside the man she once loved with all her heart. Tears welled in her eyes. "What's happening to us?" she whispered. Outside, Michael walked aimlessly down the street. His thoughts raced, his emotions tangled. He hadn't meant to cross any line. He only wanted her to feel loved again. But now he realized that in trying to comfort her, he had awakened something he didn't understand. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper, emotional, and painful. When he returned later that evening, the atmosphere in the house had changed. Eleanor had lit a candle on the table and soft music played in the background. She looked calm, composed again. "You're back," she said quietly. "Yeah," he replied. "I just needed air." Ski gave a small nod. "Good. We both needed to breathe." "Yeah," he replied. "I just needed air." She gave a small nod. "Good. We both needed to breathe." They sat opposite each other, speaking little. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was cautious. They both knew a line had been crossed that couldn't be undone. But they also knew they still cared too deeply to let distance replace love. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Michael, we'll be okay. We just have to remember who we are to each other. Love doesn't always mean closeness, so sometimes means letting space exist." He nodded, his eyes soft with regret. "I understand." She smiled faintly. "Good, then let's start again." That night, as the candle burned low, both of them sat quietly, side by side, not speaking but thinking, feeling, healing. The house felt different now. Not broken, not whole, just human. And as Michael went to bed, he knew one thing clearly. He had crossed an emotional boundary he could never step over again. From that day forward, he would learn to love her the right way, deeply, respectfully. And from the distance that love sometimes demands, Eleanor, lying awake in her room, whispered to herself he didn't mean harm. He just needed warmth. So did I. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to cry, not from grief, but from release. The pain had finally found its voice, and so had the love that had always existed, pure, quiet, and strong enough to survive even this. The house had grown quieter after that night. Not empty, not cold, just still. Catherine moved through her days as if walking through soft fog, seeing everything, yet feeling detached from it. Every sound, every word, every corner of the house held memories she didn't know how to face. Andrew was still around, but something between them had shifted. There was a new silence, heavy, complicated, and unspoken. Catherine often stood by the window where the morning sun filtered through sheer curtains, warming her face. It reminded her of life before everything became tangled, before emotions got mixed with grief and confusion. She wished she could return to that simple comfort to just be a mother, not a woman caught between love and guilt. But the heart doesn't always follow reason. And she was still trying to understand where things had gone wrong. Andrew, too, felt the change. He stayed home longer than usual, often avoiding his friends or colleagues. He didn't say much, but when he looked at his mother, his eyes carried the same uncertainty she felt. He was sorry, though he didn't have the words to say it. The line between comfort and confusion had blurred for both of them that night, when emotions had grown too raw. It's too close. Days turned into weeks, and one afternoon, Catherine received a letter. It was from her sister, living in Oregon. She hadn't visited in years, and the letter carried warmth and care, a reminder that life still moved outside her walls. Her sister invited her to spend some time there, to rest, to heal. Catherine hesitated, but something deep inside her said it was time. She needed distance, not from her son, but from the pain that had tied them too tightly together. That evening, she told Andrew about the trip. He looked startled at first, then nodded quietly. "Maybe it's good," he said softly. "You deserve some peace, Mom." His voice cracked slightly, and Catherine felt the ache of a mother's heart. Proud, sad, and tender all at once. She reached out and held his hand, a simple gesture that felt like forgiveness. There were no grand words, no dramatic apologies. Just an understanding that love doesn't disappear, even when it gets tested. The next morning, she packed her things, not much, just what she needed. Andrew helped her carry the bags to the car. The sky was clear, the air crisp. For a long moment, they stood there, neither wanting to move. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "And don't hide from life, Andrew. You have so much waiting for you." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will. I promise." As she drove away, the road stretched ahead like a clean page. The trees along the highway blurred into green waves. And for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe freely. She thought about how easy it is for people to cross emotional lines when grief and loneliness fill their hearts. But she also understood something deeper, that love in its truest form must respect boundaries. What they shared wasn't wrong in its feeling. It was wrong in how close pain had pushed them. In Oregon, Catherine found peace in small things again. Her sister's laughter, the smell of morning coffee, the sound of rain tapping on the porch roof, all of it reminded her that healing doesn't come in grand gestures, but in quiet acceptance. She started writing again, keeping a journal of her thoughts and feelings. Each page was a confession, a release, a way to let go of the heavy emotions that had trapped her. Back home, Andrew began to rebuild his own life. He started volunteering at a local shelter, meeting people whose struggles made him see his own pain differently. He found purpose in helping others heal. Sometimes he would sit alone on the porch, staring at the empty chair where his mother used to read. There was sadness, yes, but also gratitude. They had faced something painful and chosen to rise above it instead of letting it destroy them. Months passed before Catherine returned. When she stepped through the door, the house felt lighter. The air carried the scent of fresh flowers. Andrew had placed them on the table. "Welcome home," he said quietly. And for the first time in a long while, she smiled without the weight of guilt. They hugged, and it was pure, simple mother and son. Finding their balance again, over dinner that evening, they talked like old friends. Catherine told him about her walks along the beach, the sunsets she watched in silence, and the letters she wrote to herself. Andrew listened, truly listened, and told her about his work, his plans, his new sense of purpose. They laughed, shared small memories, and by the end of the night, it felt like they had gently rebuilt the bond they almost lost. Later, Catherine sat alone by the window again, the same spot where her story had felt so heavy before. But now she looked out with calm eyes. Life had tested her, and though it had taken her through confusing emotions, she had learned something lasting, that love, to be real, must sometimes let go to survive. She thought about how people don't always mean to cross lines. Sometimes it happens because they're hurting. But what defines them isn't the mistake, it's the strength to face it, to step back and to grow from it. As the night deepened, Catherine whispered a small prayer of gratitude for forgiveness, for her son's love, and for the second chance life had quietly given them. Across the hall, Andrew was asleep, peaceful for the first time in a long while, and so the boundary that once divided them had turned into a bridge built from honesty, understanding, and the kind of love that knows when to hold on and when to let go. Emily Turner stood on the sidewalk outside Anna Parker's house, hugging her jacket against the cold morning air. She had helped friends move many times, but today felt different. She couldn't explain the uneasiness in her chest, a strange mix of excitement and tension. Anna had called her the night before, laughing and saying, "You're coming tomorrow, right? Liam needs help moving in. He's bringing half of Seattle with him." Emily agreed, thinking it would be simple: carry boxes, drink coffee, maybe eat pizza after. But the moment she saw the moving van parked in the driveway, she felt a shift inside her, like she was stepping into something she wasn't prepared for. Anna came outside wearing messy sweatpants and a big grin. Finally. "You're late. Come meet my disaster of a brother." Emily laughed, walking toward her friend, but then the van door slid open, and everything inside her paused. Liam Parker stepped out slowly, carrying a box against his chest. Emily remembered him as the quiet teenager who barely spoke in high school. But the man standing in front of her was nothing like the boy she remembered. His shoulders were broader, his jaw sharper, his eyes older, tired, thoughtful, distant, like someone who had spent years learning how to hide his pain behind silence. When he noticed Emily, he froze for a second, almost surprised. Then he smiled gently. "Emily Turner, right? Anna warned me you'd make me carry all the heavy things." His voice was soft, steady, and warm in a way she didn't expect. Emily felt her cheeks warm, embarrassed by her own reaction. "Only if you deserve it," she joked, trying to sound normal. But something about him, the tired smile, the quiet strength, stayed with her as they started unloading the van for the next few hours. They carried furniture up narrow stairs and pushed boxes across wooden floors. Anna kept shouting instructions, but Emily barely heard them. Every time she passed Liam in the hallway, their arms brushed. Every time he thanked her for helping, she felt her heartbeat stumble. She kept telling herself it didn't mean anything. He was Anna's brother, someone she shouldn't look at twice. But the more she tried to ignore the feeling, the stronger it became. Inside his new apartment, Emily noticed a large cardboard box pushed into a corner. It was worn out, covered in old tape, with the words "Old Life" written across the top in fading marker. She reached for it to move it out of the way, but as she lifted it, the bottom sagged. Before she could set it down, the tape snapped and a few items scattered onto the floor. A faded photograph, a folded piece of fabric, a hospital wristband, and a letter torn in half. The room fell silent. Liam rushed toward her, dropping the lamp he had been holding. His face changed completely. Fear, worry, and something heavier flashed in his eyes. "Please," he whispered, crouching down to gather the pieces. "Please don't look at that." His voice wasn't angry. It was scared, not of her, but of the memories spilling onto the floor. Emily quickly knelt and helped him pick up the items without reading them. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "The box broke. I didn't see anything." For a moment, he didn't move. He just held the half-torn letter in his hand like it was something fragile, something he had tried to bury but couldn't let go. Emily wanted to ask what it was, why it mattered so much, what story hid behind the wristband and the torn photograph, but she didn't. She knew when someone was carrying pain they weren't ready to share. Liam cleared his throat. "Thank you," he said, though his voice cracked slightly. "I shouldn't have brought that box. I should have left it behind." "You don't have to explain," she said. "Everyone has something they want to forget." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment it felt like he saw through every mask she had ever worn. The moment passed quickly, but the feeling stayed. By late afternoon, the apartment looked livable. Anna insisted on taking them both to dinner to celebrate, but Liam shook his head. "I'm tired." "You two go," he said. I just need a quiet night." Anna pouted, but left him alone. Emily followed her out, but something stopped her halfway down the stairs. She turned back. Liam was sitting on the floor in the middle of his living room, holding the torn letter in his hands. His shoulders were hunched, his face lost in shadows. Emily hesitated, then stepped quietly inside the doorway. "Are you sure you're okay?" He didn't look up at first. He stared at the letter like he didn't know what to do with it. Finally, he said softly, "You ever have something in your life that follows you even when you think you left it behind?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, more than I want to admit." He finally looked at her, his eyes tired but honest. This is one of those things," he whispered. "Something I wish I could forget." For a second, she felt his pain like it was her own. She wanted to sit beside him, tell him he wasn't alone, tell him he didn't have to face whatever haunted him by himself. But she didn't move. She didn't know him well enough to cross that line. Not yet. "Take your time," she said softly. "No rush to unpack everything or anything." He gave the smallest, most grateful smile. "You're kind, Emily, more than you know." Those words shouldn't have meant so much. But they did. She left a minute later, walking into the evening air with a mind full of questions she didn't dare ask. Something about Liam unsettled her, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that made her heart feel heavier and lighter at the same time. She barely knew him. And yet she felt like she had stepped into a story she didn't understand. Standing outside his building, she looked up at his window. The light glowed softly, and she wondered what secrets were hidden behind that tired smile. What pain made him wince when the box fell open? What past he carried back with him? Into this town she didn't know yet, but she would soon, because helping her. Friend's brother move in was supposed to be simple, and instead became the first step into something that would stay with her far longer than she ever. Imagine. Emily didn't plan to visit Liam the next morning, but somehow her steps carried her back to his building. She kept telling herself she was only being polite. He had seemed shaken last night, and checking on him was the decent thing to do. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't just kindness. There was something about him she couldn't shake off. Something sad, unfinished, and strangely magnetic. When he opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept at all. His hair was messy, his eyes dim, and his voice a little rough. "Emily." "Hey," he said, as if surprised she was there. She offered a small smile. "I was in the area. Thought I'd bring you some coffee." He stepped aside, letting her in. The apartment smelled like cardboard and fresh paint, the scent of a life being rearranged. The same box labeled Old Life sat open in the corner, but now it was neatly taped shut, as if he was trying to keep it from falling apart again. "Rough night?" she asked gently. He let out a humorless laugh. "You could say that." For a moment, they stood in silence. Emily wasn't sure if she should stay or go. But then Liam walked toward the window, staring outside like he was searching for something that wasn't there. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said suddenly. "I didn't want you to see that box. I didn't want anyone to see it." "You don't need to apologize," she said. "Everyone has things they don't want to talk about." He turned, leaning against the counter. "Maybe, but not everyone drags their mess with them when they move across the country." His voice cracked slightly, and Emily felt the sadness in it. "You're not dragging anything," she said softly. "You're just starting over." Liam looked down at the floor. Starting over is harder than people think. Emily waited. She didn't push him. She didn't want him to feel cornered. She simply stood there, giving him the space to speak if he wanted to. Finally, he took a slow breath. "I moved back because I had nothing left in Seattle," he said. "No home, no job, no—" He paused, swallowing hard. "No fiancé." Emily's heart dropped. She hadn't expected that. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "Most people don't," he replied. "I don't talk about it." He walked over to the table and picked up the torn letter she had seen the day before. He held it carefully, like the paper itself could change if he touched it wrong. "I thought she was the one," he said. "We were planning a future, a house kid someday. All of it. She told me she loved me more than anything." Emily stayed silent, letting him go on. And then one morning, she left. No argument. No warning. Just this letter on the kitchen table. His jaw tightened. She wrote that she loved my heart, but she didn't want my life. Emily frowned. What does that even mean? That's the problem, he whispered. I don't know. She didn't explain. She didn't answer calls. She just disappeared. He set the letter down and rubbed the back of his neck like he was trying to chase away a memory. For months, I kept trying to understand. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe she found someone better. Maybe I pushed too hard or not enough. He shook his head. It made me feel like my whole life didn't belong to me anymore. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. She didn't know what to say to fix it. Maybe nothing could fix something that deep, but she wanted him to know he wasn't alone. I'm really sorry, Liam, she said. Nobody deserves to be left with questions like that. He looked up at her, and the gratitude in his eyes made her heart sink. Talking about it, it's easier with you, he admitted. You don't judge. You don't rush me. That simple confession made her heart warm in a way she didn't expect. She sat across from him at the table, feeling the quiet weight of his story settle between them. What are you going to do now? She asked. Try to rebuild, I guess, he said. Try to remember who I was before her. And maybe, he hesitated, maybe figure out how to trust people again. Emily nodded slowly. You will. When you're ready, he gave a soft, tired smile. You always say the right thing. They spent the next hour unpacking kitchen items. Emily handed him plates while he tried to arrange them in a cabinet that refused to close properly. They laughed when the cabinet door swung open again. And for a moment the heaviness between them lifted. Liam looked at her, still smiling. I haven't laughed like that in a long time. Then I'm glad I came, she said. They unpacked books next, sorting them into piles on the living room floor. As they worked, their conversations softened. He told her about his years in Seattle, the rainy mornings, the apartment he had built from nothing, the quiet routines that used to comfort him. She told him about her job, her hobbies, her own fears of feeling stuck and unseen. The more they talked, the more Emily felt something settle between them, something unspoken but undeniably real. At one point, Liam paused with a book in his hand. You know, he said, I didn't think I'd make friends here again. I thought I'd be alone for a long time. You're not alone, she said gently. He lowered the book and looked at her in a way that made her breath catch. I'm starting to see that. Emily felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She looked away, trying to calm the sudden rush of emotion. This was dangerous. This was too quick. This was more than she should feel for her best friend's brother. But she couldn't stop herself later. When they finished organizing most of the apartment, Emily grabbed her coat. I should go, she said. Anna's waiting for me. He followed her toward the door. Thanks for today, he said quietly. Really? It meant more than you know. She hesitated with her hand on the doorknob. You're welcome. Then something unexpected happened. Not a touch. Not a gesture. Just a moment, a long moment, where their eyes met and everything around them went still. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't something she could blame on impulse. It was simply two people seeing each other clearly for the first time. Emily, he said softly, you're easy to talk to. The words were gentle, but they shook her. She opened the door quickly, afraid her emotions were too visible. See you later. Liam, she whispered. She walked out before she could say something she wasn't ready to admit. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs, she felt it something new and something dangerous pulling her back toward him, and she didn't know how to stop it. Emily kept telling herself she was fine. She told herself she didn't think about Liam. She didn't check her phone every few minutes hoping he would text. She didn't replay their long conversation from yesterday in her mind. But she knew she was lying. Something had changed, and pretending otherwise felt impossible. Anna, however, noticed nothing. She was too busy scrolling through her phone at breakfast, complaining about work and traffic and her boss's attitude. Emily nodded at the right moments, but her mind kept drifting back to the moment Liam had looked at her as if she mattered, truly mattered. in a way she hadn't felt from anyone in years. By noon, she gave up pretending and messaged him, "Emily, hey, hope you're settling in." He replied almost instantly, "Liam, trying to—" "The cabinet still won't close. I think it hates me." She laughed out loud. Something light fluttered in her chest. "Emily, want help? I'm free after 4. There was a pause, just long enough to make her nervous. "Liam, I'd like that. Really, and just like that." She knew she was going. When she reached his apartment at 4:12 p.m., the door opened before she even knocked. Liam stood there with that small, tired smile she already recognized too well. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she replied, trying to sound casual even though her heart was racing. He stepped aside and she walked in. The apartment looked cleaner today, more organized, more lived in, but there were still unopened boxes stacked in corners like silent reminders of his old life. The cabinet door she'd seen yesterday hung stubbornly open. She tapped it with her finger. "Still losing the war?" He sighed dramatically. "It gets worse every hour." She grabbed the screwdriver from the table. "Let's end this." They worked side by side, adjusting the hinge, tightening the screws, testing the fit. Their shoulders brushed once, and both froze for half a second. Before stepping back slightly, the cabinet finally closed with a soft click. Liam raised his arms in victory. "We win." Emily grinned. It only took 2 adults and an hour of emotional support. He laughed, the sound warm and open. "Worth it." They sat on the couch after that, both a little tired from the minor battle. Liam pushed a mug of tea toward her. She took it, sipping the warm liquid slowly. "How was your day?" he asked. "Busy." "Anna was annoyed about everything." "She always is," he said without hesitation. Then he added quickly, "I mean, in a funny way." Emily smiled. "No, you're right. She can be dramatic." He nodded. "You're calmer, easier to talk to." That sentence made her heart jump before she could stop it. She lowered her eyes to the cup in her hands. "Well, I like listening," she said. He leaned back. Watching her for a moment, she felt his eyes on her, studying her quietly, like he was trying to read a language he hadn't spoken in a long time. "Can I ask you something?" He said, "Sure. Why did you come yesterday?" "Really?" She hesitated. The real reason was too complicated. She didn't have words for the pull she felt toward him, the soft ache that hadn't gone away since their first conversation. But she didn't want to lie. "You look sad," she said softly. "I didn't want you to feel alone." He stared at her with an expression she couldn't decode, some mix of gratitude, surprise, and something deeper, more fragile. "You're the first person who's said that to me." He whispered. Emily felt her chest tighten. How many months had he spent fighting his pain alone? How many nights had he tried to hold himself together in a cold apartment with only a letter for company? She reached out without thinking and touched his hand. Nobody should feel alone like that. Nobody. His fingers curled slightly around hers before he straightened and let go. The moment was small, but it felt huge. A shift, a step forward. He took a deep breath. "Can I tell you more? About everything?" She nodded. "Of course." He talked then, not rushed, not broken, just honest. He told her about the final months before his fiancée left. How the distance had grown without him noticing. How every smile she gave felt more like a farewell. He told her about the silence that followed the empty apartment. The way every room felt haunted by a future that was suddenly gone. "I felt like I was living in a place where time had stopped," he said, "but everyone else kept moving. Everyone except me." Emily listened, absorbing every word, feeling a sadness she wished she could lift off his shoulders. She didn't interrupt. She didn't give him meaningless advice. She just stayed there with him, letting him share the heaviness he'd carried alone for so long. When he finished, the room fell quiet. "You're stronger than you think," she said quietly. He gave a small, shaky laugh. "I don't feel strong." "You are," she insisted. "You didn't give up. You moved. You started again. That takes strength." He stared at her as if her words mattered. as if her voice was rebuilding something he thought was lost forever. "Emily," he said softly, "I'm glad you're here." She swallowed. "I'm glad too." The silence between them changed, not heavy, not awkward, but warm, comforting in a way she hadn't expected. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and froze. His sister, Anna, had texted, "Anna, where are you? Need to talk." He sighed. "She's been tense lately. I think she's stressed about something. You should go," Emily said gently. "She probably needs you." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I don't want this conversation to end." Her breath caught again. "It doesn't have to." He looked at her, hopeful. "Tomorrow." She smiled. "Yes, tomorrow." He walked her to the door. She stepped outside, but before she took the stairs, he spoke again. "Emily." She turned. His voice was soft, careful, almost scared of his own feelings. "You make the days feel lighter." For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. "Good night, Liam," she whispered. She walked down the stairs, her heart beat loud, her mind spinning. She knew she was getting too close. She knew this path was dangerous for both of them, for her friendship with Anna, for everything she had held steady for years. But the truth was simple. She didn't want to stay away. Not anymore. The week that followed was strange for Emily. She tried to go back to her normal life, to act like nothing had shifted between her and Liam. But everything had shifted. Each time she passed a quiet moment, her mind wandered to him, to the way his smile had softened when he spoke. The small pauses in conversation that felt heavier than words. The faint warmth in his touch when she had offered comfort. She knew she was falling into something complicated. Something that carried a sweetness and a risk she wasn't sure she could handle. Emily's friends noticed a change, though none could say why. Anna had been joking and teasing as usual, but Emily felt distracted, distant. She smiled at Anna's jokes and nodded at her stories, but inside she replayed the moments she had spent with Liam. Each one sharper in memory than the last. She couldn't shake the feeling that their connection was growing too fast. Too deep, but also that it was impossible to ignore. One evening, after a long day at work, Emily found herself walking toward the lake near Anna's house. The sun was dipping low, painting the water golden and calm. She didn't plan to think about Liam, but the quiet around her encouraged reflection. And reflection always led to him. She felt the need to confront the truth, what her heart had been avoiding for days. He appeared as if he had expected her, leaning against the railing near the water. The wind tugged gently at his hair, and he looked up as she approached. "Emily," he said softly, "I thought I'd find you here." She stopped a few feet away, feeling the tension in the air. "You're everywhere I think I don't want you to be," she teased lightly. Though her voice betrayed her nervousness, he smiled, a small, tired smile. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how things change so quickly and how I don't want to lose it." Emily took a deep breath. "I don't want to either, but I'm scared." He nodded, understanding. "I am too. I've been burned before, Emily, but I also feel that I can trust you, and I want to try." Her chest ached at the sincerity in his voice. She had spent so long protecting herself from disappointment, from heartbreak, from people leaving without explanation. Yet here was Liam, open, vulnerable, asking for the very thing she was terrified to give. "Trust, then we take it slow," she said finally, her voice firm yet tender. "We let ourselves be honest, we heal at our own pace, and we don't let fear run the story." He reached out slowly, just enough for their fingers to brush together. It was not a bold gesture, not a passionate one, but it carried honesty and a gentle connection neither of them could deny. "Slow," he repeated with a nod. "I can do slow, but I also can't ignore that this feels right." Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "It does feel right," she admitted, "even if it's scary." They stood together quietly, hand in hand, looking out over the lake. The sun lowered further, flecking their intertwined hands and the tentative beginnings of something fragile yet resilient. The world was calm, but inside them, emotions surged: longing, hope, uncertainty, and relief, all wrapped in one. "Emily," Liam whispered, breaking the silence, "thank you for staying, for seeing me, for understanding things I couldn't explain to anyone else." She squeezed his hand gently. "You didn't have to explain. I didn't need to understand everything to care. I just needed to be here." He looked at her, his gaze steady and sincere, and for a moment the fear that had lingered in both of them seemed to ease. The past still whispered in their minds, the lost love, the heartbreak, the unanswered questions, but the present for now was enough. Over the next few days they met regularly. Not always alone, but often in ways that allowed them to be themselves. Emily helped him unpack more boxes. They cooked simple meals together, shared laughter, and even quiet silences that were heavy with emotion but comforting in their presence. They were careful, understanding the boundaries set by Anna's family and their own cautious hearts. Yet neither could deny the growing closeness. One evening, while drinking tea on his couch, Liam turned to her. "Emily, I don't want to rush anything. I've learned what it's like to be left behind, to have my life interrupted by someone else's choice. But I also don't want to miss what we could have because I'm afraid." Emily met his gaze, her fingers brushing over his. "Neither do I. And I think sometimes the best things in life are worth a little fear." He smiled, soft and tentative. "Then we try. Together." And in that moment, they both realized that whatever the past had taken, whatever mistakes or heartbreaks had shaped them, they had found something real in each other. Something worth protecting. Something worth waiting for. Later that week, Anna noticed subtle changes too. She commented on Liam's lighter mood and Emily's brighter energy. But she didn't question the connection too closely, and Emily was grateful. She didn't need words from anyone else to validate the way her heart had slowly wore. I slowly, irrevocably leaned toward Liam. One rainy afternoon, Liam confessed to Emily something he had avoided saying. "You know, I used to think love was complicated, painful, something that comes with rules and ends with regret. But with you, it feels simple, honest, and terrifying." Emily laughed softly, leaning on his shoulder. "Terrifying can be good," she said. "It means you're alive, that you feel something real." They stayed that way for a long time, watching the rain streak the windows, listening to the quiet rhythm of the city outside. Neither spoke for a while because words were unnecessary. In that shared silence, they found comfort, intimacy, and the subtle promise of a future, one that respected the past but didn't allow it to dictate the present. Weeks passed. Each meeting, each conversation, each small gesture added layers to their connection. They weren't rushing, but the attraction, the care, the understanding between them deepened. And though Emily still sometimes felt haunted by memories of what could go wrong, she understood something crucial. Love wasn't about never being afraid. It was about choosing to face the fear with someone who made it worth it. The final night of the story, Emily found herself once more at the lake. Liam joined her without a word. They sat side by side, watching the water ripple under the moonlight. Neither needed to speak. The past and its ghosts still lingered, but for the first time, Emily felt ready to carry the weight of someone else's heart and her own together. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," she whispered. Liam took her hand, holding it gently. "Neither do I, but I know that right now. We're here, and that's enough." Emily smiled softly, feeling the warmth of his hand, the quiet of the lake, and the undeniable truth that some connections, once found, leave marks that last a lifetime. Marks not of pain or regret, but of hope, healing, and love. And though the memories of heartbreak and loneliness would sometimes haunt her, Emily knew that helping Liam move in had given her something far greater than she had expected, a chance to feel alive, understood, and truly seen. For both of them, the story was just beginning.